Good morning, friends. Welcome to the next step in OBE Journal, part 11. And seems to be just about as dark as normal. Maybe that's a little better. I spoke of Robert Moss's The Lucid Dreaming Teacher of many years, his book, The Secret History of Dreaming. Very well researched and much more than you'd ever suspect from many cultures. And there's some stuff here that's so startlingly contemporary, and it's from about 400 AD or even earlier. So let me just read this. The Bishop of Dreams. You have direct access to sacred knowledge in your dreams. Your dreams are a personal oracle that reveal the future and help you prepare for it. Don't let anyone tell you what your dreams mean. Get rid of dream dictionaries. Pay attention to signs from the world around you. Know that everything in the universe is interconnected and constantly interweaving. Use your imagination. What you grow there will be stamped on your world and on your soul, on the energy body in which you travel to another life after death. That's a quote. Amazingly, these insights come from a 5th century bishop of the church. His name was Synesius of Cyrene, and his treatise On Dreams, composed around 405, is one of the wisest books ever written on dreams, coincidence, and imagination. Synesius was a most unusual bishop. In his life and work, we find, alas, only briefly, a confluence between the best of the ancient practice of philosophy and the new religion of the Roman Empire. Synesius was a Greco-Roman aristocrat who could trace his pedigree back to the founders of Sparta 1700 years before him. That's pretty good, 1700 years. That's considerably longer than those Americans who say they go back to the Mayflower. He lived on a great estate in Cyrene, part of a modern Libya. Isn't that interesting? Enjoyed the pleasures of both the hunt and the study, and chuckled over the fact that rural folk in his area still thought, quote unquote, the king of the world was Agamemnon. He received the best possible education in his time in Alexandria in the school of Hypatia, that extraordinary woman scientist, mathematician, and Neoplatonist who strode the streets of the world city in her philosopher's cloak surrounded by eager students. It was in Alexandria that Synesius experienced his first and deepest conversion when he found the eye of the soul within him. That's quote, the eye of the soul within him, opening to reveal the sacred depth of the universe. His consciousness expanded to give him the clear vision of the one beyond the many. Well, that's Neoplatonism for sure. He saw the reality behind the forms of religion. In his quiet hours, he dedicated himself to the quote-unquote mysteries without rites, devoted to awakening the divinity within the human that corresponds and coincides with the divinity within and beyond the cosmos. He was a convert to philosophy as it was understood in the Greco-Roman world, the love and practice of wisdom. It was in Alexandria around 405 that Synesius, recently married, wrote his treatise On Dreams. In it, he makes it clear that his discussion of dreams is grounded in personal experience. Dreams had guided him in the hunt, showing him how and where to find the game. And of course, many other cultures use dreams for that same thing. That's one of the first things that primitive man did in finding game. Dreams had led him to, quote, swarms of wild beasts that have fallen to our spears, end quote. He had been guided by dreams when his city sent him to Constantinople to plead for favors from the emperor. In a hothouse of political intrigue, his dreams helped him tell friend from foe and alerted him to hostile intrigues in which his enemies hired, quote unquote, ghost-raising sorcerers, end quote, to attack him by black magic. The dream oracle, quote, helped me in the management of public office in the best interests of the cities, and finally placed me on terms of intimacy with the emperor, end quote. His dreams had contributed to his success as a writer and an orator. The dream source, quote, frequently helped me to write books, end quote, correcting his style and helping him prune archaic Attic expressions, products of his love of old books from his essays and poems. Synesius explains in his treatise that dreams are, quote, unquote, personal oracles. We want to claim authority over our dreams and reject anything and anyone who tries to come between us and the dream source. Quote, we ought to seek this branch of knowledge before all else, for it comes from us, is within us, and is the special possession of the soul for each one of us. End quote. The dream oracle speaks to us wherever we go. Quote, we can't abandon this oracle even if we try. It is with us at home and abroad, on the field of battle, in the city and in the marketplace. Dreams are our common birthright. They belong to rich and poor, to kings and slaves. The dream oracle turns no one down because of race or age, status or calling. Even the worst tyrant is powerless to separate us from our dreams, which may hold the key to his overthrow, quote, unless he could banish sleep from his kingdom. Quote, dream divination is available to all, to the good genius, to everyone, explains Synesius. It is no wonder that dreams show us the future, because dreams are experiences of soul, and, quote, the soul holds the forms of things that come into being. Synesius dismisses dream dictionaries, popular in his time as in ours, with admirable vigour. Imagine that, dream dictionaries, 400 AD. They must have been in scrolls. Popular too. Quote, I laugh at all those books and think them of little use. General definitions don't work because each dreamer is a different mirror for dream images. Some are funhouse mirrors, some are made of various materials. Big dreams do not require interpretation. Their meaning is in the experience of the dream itself. Dreams are often more divine, end quote, quite clear and obvious, or nearly so, but come only to those who live, quote, according to virtue. Steeped in Homer, he can't avoid mentioning the scene in the Odyssey where the gates of horn and ivory are described. In Synesius' view, both Homer's Penelope and the legions of commentators and borrowers fail to understand that dreams in themselves are never false. Penelope assumes that there are true dreams and deceptive dreams, quote, because she was not instructed in the matter, end quote. Deception arises through false interpretations, not false dreams. If Penelope had understood the nature of dreaming better, quote, she would have made all dreams pass through the gate of horn. We should not confuse the weakness of the interpreter with the nature of the visions themselves. End quote. He recommends setting an intention for the night. Where have you heard that before? Set your intention before you fall asleep. Quote, we shall pray for a dream, even as Homer prayed. If you are worthy, the God far away is present within you. The God far away is present within you. Projecting consciousness to the farther place, and you are here and you are there. He comes to your side when you sleep, and this is the whole system of the initiation. End quote. Synesius also stresses the value of keeping a dream journal and of writing and creating from dreams. Quote, it is no mean achievement to pass on to another something of a strange nature that has stirred in one's own soul. End quote. He urges us to keep a, quote, daybook for observations of signs and synchronicities, as well as a nightbook for dreams. Quote, all things are signs appearing through all things. They are brothers in a single living creature, the cosmos. They are written in characters of every kind. End quote. The deepest scholarship lies in reading the sign language of the world, and the true sage is a person, quote, who understands the relationship of the parts of the universe. Well, if that doesn't sound contemporary, I don't know what does. Thank you, Robert Moss, for doing that research. And the book is filled with such from many cultures. I just threw in a good one. Retrievals from fires. The Theosophist C.W. Ledbetter and his book Invisible Helpers, written over 100 years ago, talking about retrieval work as it was then. And remarkable stuff, and ridiculously similar to how we do it now. But you think you'll find much reference in books on retrieval work to Ledbetter's pioneering work? It's certainly a pioneering book. I think prior to the Theosophical movement, practitioners held to an oral tradition, whether they be magus, witch, cunning man. They did this work, but didn't write about it. That would be my guess. This is well into the book, and he's already established the ground of how people go out of their bodies at night, how they're trained to do it, and how they go around either as a group or as a teacher and a helper, teacher and a neophyte, and he's established that one young man who he calls Cyril shows a great. He's a great adept at learning this work. So that's the reference there. Another piece of work done by the same boy Cyril furnishes an almost exact parallel to some of the stories from the books which I have given in earlier pages. He and his older friend, it seems, were passing along in the prosecution of their usual work one night when they noticed a fierce glare of a big fire below them and promptly dived down to see whether they could be of any use. Promptly dived down. It's very sort of Supermanish, isn't it? I've often wondered about these superhero comics and the people that put them together, and suspected that they thought they were using their imagination to put together a project that would make them some serious money, and actually what they were doing was remembering bits and bobs of being out and about flying at night. It was a great hotel which was in flames, a huge caravanserai on the edge of a great lake. The house, many stories in height, formed three sides of a square round a sort of garden, planted with trees and flowers, while the lake formed the fourth side. The two wings ran down to the lake, the big bay windows which terminated them almost projecting over the water, so as to leave only a narrow passageway under them at the two sides. The front and wings were built round the inside wells, which contained also the lattice-work shafts of the lifts, so that when once the fire broke out, it spread with almost incredible rapidity. And before our incredible rapidity, that remind you of London? And before our friends saw it on their astral journey, all the middle floors in each of the three great blocks were in flames. Fortunately, the inmates, except one little boy, had already been rescued, though some of them had sustained serious burns and other injuries. This little fellow had been forgotten in one of the upper rooms on the left wing, for his parents were out at a ball and knew nothing of the fire, while naturally enough no one else thought of the lad till it was far too late. The fire had gained such a hold in the middle floors of that wing that nothing could have been done, even if anyone had remembered him, and his room faced onto the inner garden, which had been mentioned, so that he was completely cut off from all outside help. Besides, he was not even aware of the danger, for the dense, suffocating smoke had so gradually filled the room that his sleep had grown deeper and deeper, till he was all but stupefied. In this state he was discovered by Cyril, who seemed to be specially attracted towards children in need or danger. He first tried to make some of the people remember the boy, but in vain, and in any case it seemed scarcely possible that they could have helped him, so that it was soon evident that this was merely a waste of time. So you can see sort of dashing about from the sleeping boy in the smoky room to other adults farther away trying to stimulate their thoughts, buzzing about. The older helper then materialized Cyril. Think about that for a minute. As I've said in various other places, ghosts can materialize a temporary physical body so that you can see them, but it takes a lot of work, energy, practice. It's much easier just being a ghost kind of floating around. The older helper then materialized Cyril as before in the room and set him to work to awaken and rouse up the more than half stupefied child. After a good deal of difficulty, this was accomplished to some extent, but the boy remained in a half-dazed, semi-conscious condition through all that followed, so that he needed to be pushed and pulled about, guided and helped at every turn. The two boys first crept out of the room into the central passage, which ran through the wing, and then, finding that the smoke and the flames beginning to come through the floor made it impassable for a physical body, Cyril took the other boy back into the room again and out the window onto a stone ledge about a foot wide, which ran along the block just below the windows. Along this he managed to guide his companion, half balancing himself on the extreme edge of the ledge and half floating on air, but always placing himself outside of the other so as to keep from dizziness and prevent from feeling afraid of a fall. Towards the end of the block nearest the lake, in which direction the fire seemed to develop, they climbed in through an open window and again reached the passage, hoping to find the staircase at the end still passable. But it too was full of flame and smoke, so they crawled back along the passage, Cyril advising his companion to keep his mouth close to the ground till they reached the latticed cage of the lift running down the long well in the centre of the block. The lift, of course, was at the bottom, but they managed to clamber down the latticework inside the cage until they stood on the roof of the elevator itself. Here they found themselves blocked, but luckily Cyril discovered a doorway opening from the cage of the lift onto a sort of entresol just above the ground floor. Entresol? I'm not sure of that word. Though they reached a passage which they crossed, the little boy being half stifled by the smoke. Then they made their way through one of the rooms opposite and finally, clambering out the window, found themselves on top of a veranda which ran along in front of the ground floor between it and the garden. Thence it was easy enough to swarm down one of the pillars and reach the garden itself. But even there the heat was intense, and the danger where the walls should fall was very considerable. So Cyril tried to conduct his charge round the end of the first one, then of the other wing, but in both cases the flames had burst through and the narrow overhung passages were quite impassable. Finally, they took refuge in one of the pleasure boats which was moored to the steps of the quay at the side of the garden next to the lake, and casting loose rowed out onto the water. Cyril intended to row past the burning wing and land the boy whom he had saved, but when they were some little way out, they fell in with a passing lake steamer and were seen, for the whole scene was lit up by the glare of the burning hotel, till everything was as plain as in broad daylight. The steamer came alongside the boat to take them off, but instead of the two boys they had seen, they found only one. For his older friend had promptly allowed Cyril to slip back into his astral form, dissipating the denser matter which had made, for the time, a material body, and he was therefore now invisible. The careful search was made, of course, but no trace of the second boy could be found, and so it was concluded he must have fallen overboard and been drowned just as they came alongside. The child who had been rescued fell into a dead faint as soon as he was safe on board, so that they could extract no information from him. And when he did recover, all he could say was he had seen the other boy the moment before they came alongside, and then knew nothing more. The steamer was bound down the lake to a place some 2 days' sail distant, and it was a week or so before the rescued boy could be restored to his parents, who of course thought he had perished in the flames. For though an effort was made to impress on their minds that the fact that their son had been saved, it was found impossible to convey the idea to them, so it may be imagined how great was the joy of the meeting. The boy is still well and happy, and is never weary of relating his wonderful adventure. Many a time he has regretted that the kind friend who saved him should have perished so mysteriously at the very moment when all danger seemed over at last. Indeed, he has even ventured to suggest that perhaps he didn't perish after all, that perhaps he was a fairy prince. But of course his idea elicits nothing but tolerant smiles of superiority from his elders. The karmic link between him and his preserver has not yet been traced, but no doubt there must be one somewhere. One chapter from Invisible Helpers by C.W. Ledbetter. First published in London, 1896. I think we can see, the history of this sort of thing and the efforts that are made by those who are dedicated to the helping of others, the selfless helping of others. What did this say? Nothing new under the sun. We're well into our episode here. I'll try and focus on what I was up to myself. I am on my way today as a physical person on 2 feet to a conference, Alien Expo conference in Toronto. That's where I live, or near Toronto anyway. And there'll be people like Stephen Greer and Paul Hellyer and Grant Cameron, Victor Vigiani, and a number of experiencers and researchers talking about a variety of topics. And we'll be watching the movie Unacknowledged, about all that secret government stuff that they spend gazillions of dollars on and don't admit that they're doing. And all this is on the internet already. It's nothing new, but we are trying to broadcast it to a larger audience. And the movie just seemed to be doing rather well on iTunes. And personally, I've been following this sort of thing for decades. Been interested in it for a long while. I'm not I'm not an abductee. I've known some, and participated in discussions and various kinds of therapies with people who used to feel traumatized and don't feel quite so traumatized anymore. At least we don't hear of it so much. And the issue now seems to be getting governments to fess up about it, their interactions and their ongoing suppression of alien-derived technologies, which would make life on Earth so much cheaper and easier. Anti-gravity drives, zero-point energy field energy production, etc., etc. And certainly the threat to the petrodollar economy and the worldwide electrical grid are considerable. Corporations stand to lose a lot of money if such things were implemented on a large scale. And they will be at some point. But there'll be a struggle. There is a struggle, and there will continue to be a struggle. But hasn't life on Earth always been about that sort of thing? It seems to me that both government observers, intelligence agency disinformation specialists, hybrid beings who are part human, part alien, and full alien beings that are not part human but are doing a very good impersonation job, and who have been reported many times by many researchers and experiencers, will be there. And I'm interested to see who's going to show up and in which disguise. Maybe that's just my little take on things. I'm sure that they will be there, and I will be bemused to see who's who. And it's a confluence of influences and energies, and it's all part of a much greater confluence as we move toward that, not just the brotherhood of all mankind, but the brotherhood of all sentient beings, including people from other planetary systems, beings from other planetary systems. And I operate on the assumption, as part of my psychic background research of my own soul's journey, my own monad's appearance on the planet, that we did live elsewhere as monads before coming to Earth. I feel that Sirius is the most likely source. the Sirius A and B complex. Other people feel Andromeda, and various other spots around you. It doesn't really matter. You give a place a name, A community's a community, no matter what planet it's on. Just as cities are cities here on Earth. I can have a falafel here in Toronto, or I can have one in Paris, or I can have one in Helsinki. You can have a chicken tikka masala almost anywhere in the world at this point. And, have conversations with people in any number of communities about their lives and their lives, obviously the lives of people in civil wars and whatnot are not at all like you and me, but in countries where there's a degree of civilized behavior and sound economic structure, lives are very similar. And we are all one in our experience of day-to-day life already. Never mind where we're going to. I approach it from that sort of an angle, just in case you're wondering. So last night I projected by prearrangement to several of these beings and met up with various spirits. One of the intelligence agency disinformation agents, people who go around spreading disinformation about UFO researchers and the military operations and, that sort of a thing. They're the same sort of people that used to be used as infiltrators and still are by, various agencies. On a more political level, you have a radical political group, just like the jihadists in the States now. And we did it in Canada as well. We had a few guys wanting to blow up the rail line or a rail bridge between Montreal and New York, I think. And we had a fellow working for CSIS, I think, or the RCMP, an Egyptian man, or an Egyptian Canadian man, meet up with them in a cafe and offer to fund their work. And, I can get you the money to get those explosives and we'll blow up that bridge. And they fell for it, and they fell for the sting. And at the moment that they were about to put it on the rail tracks, they were arrested, And, that sort of thing goes on all the time. And it has been going on for hundreds of years. You have people that suss out via taverns and coffee shops and whatnot who's rebelling against who's dissatisfied and who wants to rebel. You send in a double agent. He takes notes, and when they've got enough information, they swoop in and arrest them. It's an old story. And disinformation agents and currently they've been infiltrating UFO study groups and discussion groups and whatnot for at least 50, 60 years. We know this because all the groups wind up fighting with each other, and that's human ego and ambition and that sort of a thing as well. But these people know how to push that, because what they want to do is destroy the foundation of curiosity, the foundation of penetrating the mystery, so that the government has control over the mystery. It's all about control and who forms the narrative, and who gets the narrative on the major media. And of course, with the internet, we have many alternate narratives, and then they have to resort to mockery and character assassination, and that's also an old trick: mockery and character assassination. If they can't get you for a crime, they'll get you for your sexual habits, or they'll make something up: drug addiction, seducing of minors, the usual stuff. And not that people wouldn't do that anyway. We know people. Look at Anthony Weiner. Talk about a self-destructive fool. It didn't need any help at all. Did it all by himself. Although there does seem to have been a bit of a conspiracy against him, with some sites say the second girl was not nearly as young as she claimed to be, and was not even the person that she claimed to be was actually a fully fledged adult female impersonating a 16-year-old or whatever. Anyway, that seems to have passed us by, but human weakness is what it is, and these people know how to take advantage of that, and that's a certain intelligence and cunning in and of itself. So okay, let me just channel this guy, because I was talking to him just a little while ago. We feel, he said, that mankind is not ready for this sort of a thing. It's too explosive, potentially too explosive. The secrets have to be kept, and we are the best ones to do it. And the people who wish to make this more public are dangerous, self-seeking, ambitious, and not nearly as caring for mankind as they would appear to be. Well, I said, or I'm saying, or whatever, and what makes you the judge of their characters? And he said, they have been studied for quite some time, and I have personally observed and interacted with them, and sensed the craziness of their plan. Having millions of people suddenly be aware that we have been interacting with aliens of many kinds for decades, if not hundreds of years, and revealing the extent of the deep extent of the deep mystery of the universe, the many universes, and the far beyond human activity that goes on there is too much for the average person. They need to be protected from this. This will sow the seeds of social chaos, as if we don't have enough already, will threaten every religion on the planet, and the stability of economies, the stability of democracies, and the ongoing peaceful conduct of international relations. And I said to him, well, that's quite an argument. So you really believe that? And he goes, I certainly do. And I said, any methods you use to achieve that aim of suppressing all this stuff and sowing disbelief and doubt and in the potential audience is worthwhile? And he goes, it certainly is. He feels that this has to be held back, just in the same way that radical political destruction, i.e. from places like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, has to be fought tooth and nail the whole way. And he's pretty strong in his beliefs. And he reminds me of that previous generation, I think he's American, I'm pretty sure he is, of Americans that fought all manifestations of communism in the Cold War period. You know, Alan Dulles, William Colby, people whose lives we now know a lot about because they've been researched and written about. And we know that they engaged in all kinds of activity, bribery, fraud, character assassination and actual assassination of those that would appear to be, you know, in various countries, Italy, Greece, whatnot, advancing the cause of Moscow-based communism. And they would hold back at nothing. Nothing at all. And much chaos was sown, civil wars started, assassinations funded by these people. And they were passionate about this, very passionate, and believed in their righteousness. They were saving the world from a conversion into godless communism. And not that I'm any kind of a big fan of Russian communism, I'm not. But the methods of suppression were efficient and brutal and ruthless. And to a large degree, the suppression of UFO, alien technology knowledge is just as ruthless and brutal. Not that many people have died, but a lot of people have been talked out of their activities, by people that show up either at their workplace or their home and say politely, cease and desist, or we will cease and desist you. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, the most obvious case is the soldiers that came to the houses of the local ranchers around Roswell and said if they'd seen anything, they were to never talk about it. This is back in the Roswell crash period. And many people have spoken on this, saying, well, my father experienced that, or my uncle, my grandfather. So the brutality has not ceased. I'm not saying large numbers of people have been massacred. People usually take the hint and shut up. But more recently, it would seem, according to Stephen Greer anyway, there are those in the secret government who will make the threats and others who disagree with them, who think, no, this stuff should be more opened up, and will come to the people that have been threatened and say, listen, act this way and we'll protect you. We'll make sure, we'll put the order down the line that you're not to be harmed. Last time I saw Greer speak, he actually said that very thing. Whether he's telling the truth or not, it's another story. It's a good story, but is it true? There's lots of deception in the UFO field, and it's not just from the government disinformation agents, let me tell you. So I talked to that chap briefly, and he was good enough to talk to me, and I explained what I was doing. And he said, well, keep it anonymous. Here's the viewpoint, and just don't say who I am. Not that I did know who he was. When you contact people astrally, you don't need to know their names. Guides will take you places. Okay, some alien entities, EBEs, biological entities, beings who are on this planet, not as hybrids, being born through genetic manipulation in the lab and then birthed, more alien beings that can be here and look very human, even though they're not, and interact with us and learn our ways and be comfortable with us. There's been reports of these people for years. They're usually very highly intelligent, very psychic, sense when you're around, can turn your thoughts away from focusing on them, whether you see them in a coffee shop or a train, make you forget that you saw them, that sort of mental control. And I met up with a couple of them last night, briefly, man and a woman pretending, aping the whole character study of human beings that are married. And they're here on a observation and interaction experiment. They've been here for a large number of years, and they missed their home planet and the superior intelligence of their own beings and of their, what are they now? They're Pleiadians of some sort. There's lots of different types of Pleiadians, just like, there's more than one race there. They're all related, and they all sort of think of themselves as Pleiadians or Pleiadians or however you want to call them. And various researchers have written a number of books on them. Can't remember the name. Barbara Marciniak. There's 2 or 3 people who have written extensively on the Pleiadians, and you can track that one down, no problem. They feel quite superior to us in their mental capacities and their psychic abilities and their brain function. But they understand that belittling us and taking advantage of ours is not, particularly a wise course. They understand the actions of karma and from their own pasts, and are happy to observe and interact in a fairly neutral way. And they're like scientists studying us in many ways. And they do learn from us because our ways are so quaint and old-fashioned. And I think they're going to be at this conference. And they said, see if you can find us, they said. And I said, well, sure. Because, when I'm there with them during the night doesn't mean that I'm going to remember it all and, during today, but, I'll give it a go. And, basically they're just going to be 2 other people that are going to be at the conference. And they might be a little shy and retiring. They might be very polite and discreet, all sorts of things. Behavior patterns are behavior patterns, and they've got their own, and they've learned some from us, and they use the ones that they've learned from us in order to make us comfortable and ignore them, basically. They want to do their work without being disturbed in any great way, and their work is observing us and collating the data for their own, their own society. They have many beings out in different societies around the multiverse, observing and collating data. Just as we have many scientists studying, or biologists, whatever, studying plants and animals all around the world, and sharing the evidence in scientific journals. It's very, very similar. And, we tag birds and we tag fish and we observe them from season to season. And that metaphor has been used by UFO researchers for sure. And the Pleiadians are not particularly involved in the hybrid breeding program. That's more the greys and whatnot. And the various alien races that are around don't always agree with each other in terms of, what to do, what not to do, attitudes to take, attitudes not to take. There's a certain toleration of different ways, in the same way that Republican senators and Democrat senators will argue on the floor and then have dinner later together, as Bernie Sanders has pointed out many times. I know lots of Republicans. They have to interact in a way to further the cause of democracy, whether they bitterly disagree on issues or not. Anyway, Pleiadians are the same. And without getting more into depth, there's plenty of books on this. I did ask about the galactic, federation, and they said, well, you're already in it. There's no fussing about that. You're junior members, i.e., Earthlings, but you're in it. You're welcomed and you're in it. And the people that are representatives don't always remember that they're representatives. They come to meetings when they're out of body and interact in a sort of junior way because they don't understand all the issues because you're recent arrivals. But you are part of the system, and you need not worry about being blended into the system completely over the decades, because you will be, despite your warlike activities. That we can moderate and modulate, and this relates back to things I've written about before, uh, i.e., the whole nuclear issue, and I include our pals in North Korea in that one, can be controlled psychically, and warheads can be deactivated, and have been, and not just by alien beings, but by our own angelic entities, human, well, not human angels, but angels that belong on this planet, as it were. And it's a bit of a red herring to worry about it. All this stuff can be deactivated by an act of will at any time, just in the same way in the 50s and 60s, uh, little fleets of UFOs would hover over missile sites and deactivate the power system so that they couldn't, open the gates, fire, couldn't do anything, couldn't even make a cup of tea, I don't think. And this wasn't talked about at first, but it's talked about quite readily now. And they were just showing, it wasn't an aggressive activity, they were just showing, we're not going to let you do this. You can have your little wars, but you're not using nuclear weapons. And the same thing will happen to North Korea if they really try to do it. I don't think they will, but just to let you know, and the Pleiadians are well aware of this, and they reiterated that when I was chatting with them, and they sort of said the general attitude seemed to be, let us get on with what we want to do, and we'll let you get on with what you want to do, and your struggle against those in your society that would suppress the greater knowledge is your struggle. It is, we have to lift the blinders from our own eyes and stop blaming others for putting the blinders there in the first place, because we bowed down and we accepted it. And we have to not accept it as individuals and society. We have to seek the light of knowledge and understanding, and have to want it passionately. And that once we do, once we generate that level of energy, it will not blow open that door. And we don't have to use, sticks, guns, or explosives. The energy of our desire and our will to knowledge will be enough. And I think that's a good place to leave it for today. And have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.